Absolute value, Chapter 2, Lesson 2. Absolute value means the distance of a number from 0 on the number line. There's a huge hint here. Absolute value can never be negative. It never will be so. You know that you are going to be looking to find absolute value when you see a number between two lines, two straight parallel lines like this. So to find the absolute value of -6 is going to simply be 6. Again, it wouldn't be negative. We can use a number line to find absolute value by simply counting how many units a number is from 0. So from -4, we start at 0 and go 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, we're counting how many units away. So it's not a negative unit away. It's just 4. And the same would be for +4. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's 4 units away. So opposite numbers, -4 and +4, have the same absolute value. So let's practice here using absolute value with the number line. You can count. Start at 0 for -12 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So the absolute value of -12 is 12. Let's try for 7 now. Sorry, -7. So again, I'm always starting at 0. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The absolute value of -7 is 7. Let's try with 4, which we already did on the other page, so we'll just fill that in because we know the absolute value is 4. How about -10 here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's just 10. I'm guessing by now you've realized the absolute value of a number is just simply the number by itself. So the absolute value of 6 is 6, and the absolute value of -5 is 5. Why don't you pause now and find the absolute value of 7 through 12 and come back in a moment and compare your answers to mine. So again, the absolute value of any digit is just, it's the numbers itself. It will never be positive. Never be negative because distance is not negative. We can also use absolute value to compare numbers or compare numbers that are written in absolute value. I highly recommend while doing this that you actually write the absolute value down first so you don't make any errors just because you see a negative sign. So the absolute value in this example of -3 is 3, and the absolute value of +1 is 1. So we know that 3 is greater than 1. The absolute value of -40 is 40. I write it down. The absolute value of -37 is 37. So again, 40 is greater than 37. The absolute value of 171 is 171. And the absolute value of -200 is 200. So 171 is less than 200. -9, the absolute value of -9 is 9. And the absolute value of 10 is 10. So the absolute value of -9 is less than the absolute value of 10. Again, please pause, try the rest on your own, and come back in a minute and compare your answers with mine. There you go. I bet you got them all correct. So we know that negative numbers occur in real-world situations, such as temperature, which this example is going to talk about, a loss in yards, maybe in a football game, how many feet below sea level. But so we are going to use absolute value to help us answer questions. So this table shows the temperature on a given day in December in 4 different cities. We know in December here in Wisconsin it can be pretty cold. So these cities might be somewhere nearby. But here we have City A at -6 degrees Celsius, City B at -10 degrees Celsius, City C at -25 degrees Celsius, and City D at -2 degrees Celsius. Question A, which city had the highest temperature? We know it's City D because since all of these are negative, we're picking the one with the smallest digit because that one's closest to 0. And just the opposite, we're asking for the lowest temperature, so we're looking for City C here, which is the furthest from 0 at -25 degrees. Question C, how many degrees Celsius below 0 were recorded for City A? Below is a distance question, so they're just simply asking us what's the absolute value for City A. So I put -6 degrees Celsius inside my absolute value bar, and that's where 6 degrees comes from. In question D, there's actually a mistake. What is the difference in temperature? Difference tells us that we actually have to subtract. I'm not sure why they added in their example, but we're just going to find the absolute value of both temperatures. -25 absolute value is 25 minus the absolute value of -10, which is just 10. And you know, of course, that would equal 15 degrees Celsius, not 35. Again, I apologize for that printing error. But again, pay attention to the wording. They're looking for the difference, so we know we subtract. So let's try this one, number 19. Again, we're talking about temperatures here. Table shows the temperature of 4 cities on a day in November. Minnesota, -3. Chicago, -8. Houston, +12 degrees. And New York, +3 degrees Celsius. Which city had the highest temperature? I'm hoping that you automatically know to go to the positives because we know positives are always larger than negative. So I see here I have 12 and 3. So 12 is larger than 3, so my answer would be Houston. Letter B, which city had a temperature of 3 degrees Celsius below 0? Again, that's a distance question. So which city had an absolute value of 3 degrees Celsius? Well, I see that I have 2 cities that could possibly be that. Or I'm sorry, below 0. So because it's below, I know that it needs to be negative. I have 2 that say 3, New York and Minnesota. But Minnesota is the only one that's negative. So now, which city had a temperature greater than New York's? So New York is a +3 degrees Celsius. Again, the only other city that has a positive temperature is Houston. So it has to be Houston. And number 4, what's the difference in temperature between Chicago and Houston? Difference. Here I have a -8 degrees Celsius. And in Houston, I have 12 degrees Celsius. This is where you would add. We're going to add here because I'm using a positive and negative. If I use 2 negatives, like in the last slide, I subtract. I know that can be a little confusing. Feel free to ask questions when you see these. But again, I'm going to put the absolute value of 12, which was Houston, plus the absolute value of -8, which was Chicago, and add those together, and I will get 20 degrees Celsius. If you put it on a number line and actually counted from -8, and here would be 0, and then +12. This isn't really an accurate representation, but I want to show you. we'd have the absolute value here would be 8, and then here would be 12. So that's where I see the difference is 8 plus 12 equals 20. If drawing a number line helps you with these types of questions, I highly suggest you do it. It's going to be way easier to see what you're supposed to do with the difference in that type of occasion. Again, feel free if you get stuck on those to ask me questions when you get to small group in class.